Hello, everybody. Welcome to In Frame. I'm Daniel Lewis Hanab. I'm here with my co-host, David Michael Alexander, Godfrey Cesar Sedano, and Stalin Livichuska. And we have our special guest today. Very excited to have him here. He's a cinematographer and image maker, GK. Welcome. Let's give him a round of applause, everybody. Yeah. Very, very excited.
Thank you.
How did you get into, when did you start photography or cinematography? Was it photography first? Was it cinematography first? What is your backstory?
What's the story?
First off, I just want to thank you all for the opportunity to be here. I think this is such a special moment for me, and I just want to thank you all. Yeah, in terms of how I started off as an image maker, it really started from my obsession with art. My brother was a painter growing up, and my dad wasn't really around as much. So, like, my brother was like, you know, that father figure in my life. So, you know, him being into painting kind of informed my obsession with art. And then later down the line, I got into photography, graphic design. And it's so funny because Call of Duty montages of like making Call of Duty montages back in the day is kind of what created somewhat of a path towards being a filmmaker, and also recording videos at the quarter-mile racetrack. And that kind of set the tone or the foundation that will ultimately then lead me towards filmmaking and cinematography. And
Wait, you recorded Call of Duty? Like you playing Call of Duty?
Yeah, so
Modern Warfare 2?
Nah, the first Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4.
Yo, that shit was good.
Yeah,
that
was the Halo montage.
Yeah,
and Halo
also,
montage
with the Linkin Park
so
songs.
funny enough, that's all tied into it.
You did zombies too?
Yep.
Yeah, like
Machinima, Red versus Blue.
Old school.
That was
throwback.
Xbox or PS5 or PlayStation?
PlayStation, man.
Oh shit! Yeah, damn.
PlayStation every day. But yeah, back in the day, Machinima, Red versus Blue, Call of Duty montages. That's when I first started like editing videos, and I just really loved it. And I was doing a graphic design course, and my teacher was a photographer, and he noticed that I really loved video editing and was really good with images, and he kind of took me up under his wing and mentored me to become a photographer and shooting weddings, events. He also shot at the racetrack, so while he was doing photography, I would do videos at the racetrack, same with weddings. And that graphic design program I did, they chose the top 3 students to go on an internship, and I was one of those students that got chosen to then intern at a broadcast company, broadcast station for new media in Antigua. And that's when I got introduced to producing, directing, editing. And at the time, I never really fathomed the idea that I was kind of being prepped to be a documentary director, but I was. We would shoot small businesses on the island and essentially give them free promo to have their businesses on YouTube, and so set up 3-point lighting and do interviews and just give them a platform that their businesses can be seen by a greater audience. And now looking back at that moment in time, it really set the foundation once again for me being where I'm at now, is just learning all aspects of video production. I'm wearing many hats at one given time, shooting on the 5D. And
I was just going to ask you, what would you shoot on the island?
So one of my first cameras that I shot on was a Rebel XSI, and in terms of video was the GOAT Rebel
T3i.
Yeah. So
he had one too, I think, right? You had a T3i.
Yeah, that was basically my film school. Like as a kid, it was just like just working on that. It was just like crazy.
They got to renew that, the T3i renewed with a PL mount, maybe. Yeah, that shit would be fire.
Oh, Magic Lantern. Yeah.
Magic Lantern, yup.
You use Magic Lantern?
Yes.
Oh, hell yeah.
Hell yeah, yeah. One of the first films that I made was shot on a 5D with Magic Lantern, and it was a friend of mine was a chef, and his team got invited to go to Puerto Rico to do a grilling competition, and I was essentially doing media, and I made a documentary about the travel and the process of the journey and the competition. And again, the internship at the broadcast company or broadcast station informed that documentary in so many ways, because just like shooting those small businesses and giving them a platform, it was kind of the same thing. Doing interviews or doing certain lighting setups, it all felt the same. So essentially made it my first film, which was that documentary of the start from leaving Antigua to, I think we came second in the competition, if I'm not mistaken. And we came back and just kind of documented the full process again on a 5D. I was the sound operator, director, full yard, 9-yard and everything.
Yeah,
So,
the whole nine.
yeah. It was
Hell
good time.
yeah.
What made you then, I guess, what was the moment that you decided that this was going to be a career for you, to be a full-time DP?
Funny enough, even in Antigua, the one thing that really inspired me to want to pursue becoming a DP was a music video that a friend of mine, they weren't friends at the time, but a music video that I had saw by an artist. He goes by the name of Just Bus Nation. Sometimes and Shabia Kirshner, who is now a dear friend to me, a friend of mine, and Just Bus as well, I created that music video, and it was so profound because I've never seen anything that was created at that level on the island that felt like a big budget MTV music video. And Shabia Kirshner is the cinematographer who shot sorry, I'm blanking, but he shot Past Lives. So
Oh shit.
so to see him at that level while I was in freshman in college, to then, becoming a friend of his at the time and seeing him killing it on the 5D. And I did a commercial with him for tourism, and just how sharp he was, and just his knowledge of cinema, and just how he just created a spark in my mind that made me want to think from videographer to cinematography. Because at the time, I didn't even know what a cinematographer was, or even let alone ever thought about the fact that I could make films. When I watched films at the time, it was just more so entertainment, with my brain kind of not really seeking further, until that moment where being amongst him and being amongst another friend, Anderson ATA Andrews, who's another cinematographer who went to Full Sail University with Sway Mendez and Spiff TV, who does music videos for
Sway?
Drake. Yeah.
The guy on radio. Oh no, not that Sway.
No, not Sway in the morning.
Sway. I don't know people that well.
No, Sway.
You ain't got the answers, Sway.
How Sway?
He did have the answer.
He did. He definitely did. So even in Antigua, I was just surrounded by people who were really doing it at a high level even back then. So it just kind of created that law of attraction, if you will, for me to then kind of wanted to seek more. And I was born in the U.S., grew up most of my life in Antigua, and ultimately decided I would come back to the U.S. to pursue college, but didn't really do much research in it. I just had that passion, that burning desire to pursue filmmaking, and I realized film school is expensive as fuck. And I dropped out of college doing computer network engineering to pursue filmmaking because it felt more in line with what I wanted to do. And I was like, I don't feel like paying off another student loan. So I kind of just hit the ground running doing music videos. And then lucky enough, I got the chance to camera appear on She's Gotta Have It Season 2, which is where I met my mentor and dear friend, Daniel Patterson. and just seeing him work and just his affinity for just the way he has a certain intentionality about the images that he create, and his militancy about paying it forward, because knowing like if he wouldn't provide that knowledge to me, then more than likely no one might have. Or so just being around, again, law of attraction, being around Spike Lee and those folks and the community that they had, which felt so special, just really inspired me to want to pursue cinema further.
I just have a question about, so to go back to how you're talking about seeing these cinematographers work, you use like descriptions of like sharp and then just like intention. Do you feel like you try to take these methods, and what exactly do you pay attention to when you see somebody work, and what sticks out to you the most? Because I feel like technical knowledge, while important, doesn't really, I feel like it goes hand in hand with intention. So I want to kind of explore like, what did you find first, and then how did your thought about workflow change?
That's a great question. I think in terms of the things that I see when someone is working, that stands out to me, it's really about intention at the end of the day. And I've always been a big believer of like a pretty image is just kind of one thing, but like what's the intention behind it? What are you trying to alchemize within this image? And for me, it's very much about intention. And I'm very fortunate to have met some really great cinematographers along the way, and all of which had great intention as to why they're doing the thing that they're doing. And for me, that's a big part of who I am, is that urge to seek further, and that urge to, me personally, I love the concept of finding the soul within an image. And that's something that's always stuck with me because of growing up in the church with a really religious background. And that created somewhat of a spiritual foundation for me, that even while creating images, I kind of think of them as prayers or meditation, or just a way of just understanding life to not just a one-dimensional life is life. We having good times and sad times, but more so like what does it all mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like from the work that you shared with us in the chat, 3 films, that you, from what you're saying right now, it makes me think about the Pauline Kael quote about French New Wave films, that when Godard and Truffaut, when they both tackled very at the time, why the French New Wave was so celebrated by and still is to this day, is that they took very banal genre stories, and they wanted to tell the poetry between the lines of what was already redundant and cliched in fact. And when I hear that quote, this is her describing what she thinks of them. I get that sense from the films that you had showed, because there's a lot of like moments within those 3 films where you kind of just let the camera stay with the character, and there is like a grasp of like maybe joy, bliss, or mourning, or a character loses their mother, a character feels rejected and sees someone else like win unjustly, and another character cannot be accepted within a community of people of a different color. And there's so many different emotions that are gravitated within those images that you stay very true to. You wrote on an IG post, I was telling you earlier that I saw, is that you said your work is an esoteric blend of culture, intuition, and emotional intelligence, which I completely see. Can you describe your process of connecting these elements when conceptualizing a project as a DP, or when you're having a conversation with a director? Let's just how deep do you get into that with those elements that you described?
In terms of the process and how I kind of walk through it, for me, it's again about intention. And at the end of the day, like as cinematographers, we're in service of the story and the director's vision. So I try to find ways in which I can alchemize a sort of intentionality or the vision that a director or what's within the script, try to infuse that within the image without like really having to say anything. So in terms of just the esoteric way of going about it, for me, again, it's like finding the spirit within the image, finding the spirit within a certain moment, because at the end of the day, if you see a person's hand, there is a story within that moment, that hand as well. You know, what has gone through to allow the person to be, or that character to be where they are within a specific scene or point within the film. So for me, it's like everything is important, you know what I mean? And we should kind of treat it as such. So for me, it's more so about using feeling and using that emotional intelligence or that inner child to just, whatever speaks to me is kind of what I go towards. So if that inner voice says one thing or another, that's kind of what I gravitate to. And a lot of the films that I do decide to work on is more so from that standpoint of like, if it speaks to me from that way.
I feel like I want to touch upon like the word like intention, because I feel like from what you're saying, like everything you're shooting now, you have a plan, you have a strategy. And I feel like when you're starting off, I feel like you hear that a lot from people that are in this position or like mentors. It's like you need to have an intention and there has to be a reason you do something. So my question is, how do you feel like you really built that intention? And when did you feel like in your journey, you really started to feel like, I trust myself to make this decision? Because I feel like a lot of people in the beginning, like you're like, should I do this? Should I do that? There's a lot of doubt. But after, of course, a lot of repetition, you really trust yourself. So how did you like really develop that? And when did you feel like you were like, I can really trust my gut. I can really trust my feeling. Like, was there like a project or a certain point in like your career where you were like, I can really trust myself to like make this decision?
Thank you for that question, man. It's rough because I say it's rough because I had really bad imposter syndrome when I first started. You know, I think my nature of being really shy and sometimes being very socially awkward because of that shyness and kind of my upbringing in a sense. I used to go against my gut a lot and just what my feelings were towards one thing or another. But as I continued to like, I guess, practice, if you will, or shoot, I realized that creating beautiful images is somewhat boring to me. After a while, it's like, you know, the image is pretty, but is it pretty because it's entertaining? You know what I mean? And that's usually why people, I feel, I could be wrong, but I feel like that's why a lot of people make pretty images, is because they sell. Yeah. You know what I mean? But other than that, why? Yeah. And I think that question of why, which I was always that person growing up, like I was always that kid in church asking like, you know, you shouldn't question this or that. And I'll be like, but why? Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's how I always am. I like to ask why, and I like to try to go deeper. And it's only until within the past 2 years, I would say, where I feel like I have a better equilibrium with just my inner voice and just kind of wanting to go along that path of not, you know, I used to be very hard, and I somewhat still am, very hard on myself when it comes to lighting and just various different things where I think, you know, you should know as a DP. And now I'm kind of being more precious with myself and just understanding also, this is something that I've had a conversation with one of my gaffers, Real, that a lot of the peoples that we look, a lot of the filmmakers, that we look up to are, that we aspire to be, are already kind of in their prime, or they found their stride. And where I'm at in my career right now, like I'm still finding my voice. So I think to be somewhat precious with my self, not precious, but just to be a little bit easy on myself at this point in my career, and understanding all of these things that I'm trying to find on a technical sense will come, but to the greater conversation about like understanding story or the why or an intentionality about an image, that is something that I probably should focus more on now than worrying about the lighting and various different things, because ultimately it's gonna come.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question, also based on intention. Do you feel like now going into jobs, sets, and all that good stuff, do you feel like you have good intention? Like you have a good sense of what you intend to do, no matter what the job is asking you? Or do you feel like sometimes you still, second guess yourself and struggle with like, hey, I don't really know what to do, you know? Because like sometimes I get a little, I second guess a lot. I always ask for advice, like, yo, what should we do? I really, even though I do make a lot of decisions, I fucking hate making decisions because, like, what if it's the wrong decisions? Cap? He's like, Cap. Some decisions I love to make, but some decisions I'm like, it's like, fuck, like, it's hard because you make the decision, but you're not going to see the outcome of the decision until it's done. And is it the right decision? So, like, my question is, do you feel like the intentions now that you make with your cinematography, and I know you also do photography, do you feel like you've become a little more comfortable with your intentions when it comes to those kind of things?
Yeah, I think I'm at a place right now where I'm a little bit more comfortable with my decision making. I would say it's also comforting to hear cinematographers like Roger Deakins would say, whenever he goes to do a project, he always gets scared or anxious because you're trying to keep a certain standard for yourself at the end of the day. And I think for me, that definitely does play into it a lot of like real money is on the line for a lot of these projects. And sometimes it's not really set up for your success. It's more set up to make money at the end of the day. And
this whole game is a business.
Whole game is a business, and it's a very much of a balancing act where you come into a project and people say this or that, and then when it's time to shoot said project, you realize that the emotional connection to the project is not even there. Yeah. You know what I mean? And this is something that I've had to battle with a lot on commercial projects, because it's about this or it's about community and it's about that or this, and then I personally don't feel that when I'm on set, and it's tough. But now I've gotten to a point of realizing it's about like keeping good folks around you. So from your focus pullers to your gaffers or just crew, and working with homies that make it feel like family. So it feels less of a job or more of a daunting task, or even if there like things behind the scenes within the production doesn't really align with where you are at that point in life, having that family dynamic and that good energy around helps it to just flow a little bit more smoother.
Hell yeah. Yeah, keeping that circle tight is mad important. I struggle finding new people. I hate finding new people for like different. It's like, I just want to keep the same circle. But, sometimes it's like finding new people it's always necessary. You always have to find new talent. But yeah, it's challenging sometimes,
And you make decisions differently depending on who's around,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
The more comfortable you are, the more you realize you're not operating out of like anxiousness.
Yeah. You also never know, like, maybe you find like a collaborator or like someone who's going to work with you, like who's going to transcend you, who you've never thought that this would happen,
This is true.
It's always possible. That's always the goal when you find new talent. You want to find new talent that are going to elevate you, not devalue, not like lower you, not make it a hassle for you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's about how it aligns. If it's a smooth process or if it feels like there's a lot of friction, then you just kind of go by project basis. And working in production to a point is somewhat like a relationship where there's certain things that flow, but the compatibility might not necessarily be there. And then, what is the greater purpose is another conversation within relationships. And yeah, you just have to find, for me personally, I just try to find people that we just mesh together. And even if we don't agree, that's fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But once it comes to a point where we're being intentional about the goal that we're trying to pursue, I think that's the most important thing.
Hell yeah.
Do you-
And good vibes.
Do you take suggestions well as a DP, or do you feel
100%.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'm kind of a weird one in a sense where I've realized that there's like this Euro-American or this Western way of the DP is the person who called the shots and da-da-da-da-da-da. But if a PA tells me or suggests something and I think it's a great idea, I'm going with it. You know what I mean?
And what if it's a whack idea? How do
I
you-
mean, we all have ideas, and I think, again, keeping people around that are just being intentional and you know it's coming from a good place.
Yeah.
I think is just the way to go.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Best idea wins. I mean, I feel like most creative kind of like networks tend to operate that way. Like even in design and stuff, it's like best idea wins.
Absolutely.
There's like a stripping of the ego.
Yeah,
It's I
100%.
was gonna say I think it's the reason the whole Western thing. It's an ego thing too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
like people work hard. Well, some people work hard to get to the a level of leadership and want to call shots. So when they get their shit challenged, they're like, "Yo, you trying to take my place here?" I just
Yeah.
think that's where it stems from. But
It's just like a deep ingrained culture of individualism in this country. Where growing up, like we're all made to seem that we're all competing with each other, that everyone's like an enemy, and there's not enough in a pot to go around for everybody. But as soon as you start to grow and mature, you realize like every great project or every great nation was built like on the backs of collaborators and people.
Yeah.
It was never one person. There might be one person calling the shots, but it always takes a whole team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something I definitely struggled with when I moved here. I mean, growing up most of my life in Antigua, where you knew your neighbor's first and last name, you knew, who their brothers and sisters were, sometimes mom, dad, and coming to New York City, and I realized not a lot of the spaces that I've been into operates like that. Mind you, even when my first instance of taking the subway, and I go on the subway and say, "Good morning." Everyone
oh
looks
hell
at me
no!
like,
Don't fucking talk to me on the subway. Fuck that.
You don't even take the subway. You
Yeah,
drive.
but when I do, don't talk to me. Fuck that.
Cab, man.
I hate it when people talk to me on the subway, even if it's like.
You see, that's a New York
even people
thing.
I know. Like, let's say I see somebody
That's
on the
a
subway
Western-
that I know.
That's
I'm
Western
like,
culture for you.
Fuck, like they lock
We're
eyes on
very,
me.
we're very guarded here.
I just think
no.
New Yorkers have a different way of just like expressing.
Yes,
We're
100%.
assholes.
You know,
Yeah.
no, but like,
We're
like
kind
that,
assholes.
that whole
that's our nature.
that whole
Yeah.
stereotype that it's like, yo, we'll call you a dumbass, but help you with your baby carriage going up the
Yeah.
stairs. That's a real thing. Like,
I've
I
done
feel-
that
Yeah,
before.
yeah.
You know, it's like you'll walk
Yeah.
slow, but I'm gonna hold the
Everyone
door open.
think,
you know?
Yeah.
We just move a specific way.
But
here.
I was gonna say, do you attribute, because I feel like I've worked with you on set before, and I feel like you do a good job of having this communal spirit on sets. It never feels like you're above anybody or anything like that. I think you do a good job of communicating. Like, hey, listen, if you have something you want to say, just say it. Do you attribute that to like how you were raised and everything?
100%. I don't really even think in the hierarchical way. I just think we all have our roles and we come together to make
right.
something work. And that's kind of just how I live by it. I mean, I'm not trying to be above anyone. Mind you, like, even the first time I heard the term above the line, it tripped me out because I'm like, what the
Yeah, isn't that like fucked up? Like,
It's
like you're up above, below. Like,
is I was like, what's really going on?
what's this
here?
line
You know
here?
what
What
I
are we
mean?
talking about?
And then,
Like,
mind you, there's in even this industry as well is like people of color is being redlined in so many different ways of out of equity and various different things, and it's just like you're co-opting our voices or culture or art, but then you're capping us as you're giving us a glass ceiling as to where and how far we should rise. And it's fucked up, but pardon my French. But again,
this is a safe space, my friend.
I just, again, I try to kind of keep that sort of foundation as far as how I grew up, because it's very important to me. It helps me to just be who I am and walk with the traditions and the lineage of the people who created a path before me and for me. So yeah.
Yeah. It's funny seeing sets that are like, yeah, we're inclusive, and it's just like you just look at the HODs and you're like, oh, word, okay. It's fucking weird.
Yeah, it's interesting, and again, it's like, I think for me the kind of shift within cultures was something that was really hard for me to really grapple with at first. Now I'm having a lot better time of like just realizing it is what it is. But yeah, for me, it's like injustice in that sense is tough for me because of also knowing how my family grew up and how poor they grew up. My grandmother, I mentioned kind of earlier, like she was born in 1935. Grew up in a home that was sticks and cane trash for a roof. And that wasn't because they couldn't afford more. That's just because the system at play allowed them to, again, create a glass ceiling so that they can only rise so far. And she was born in a town that was surrounded by plantations. So I think you know the story there. So for me, that's why there's certain things within production and just life in general hits me a different way, because I've seen the suffering of my people and just people that I love having to really go through, because there's a system in place that sets it a way that you're just going to suffer for the sake of suffering, not for the sake of adversity. You know what I mean? So for me, again, I try to set myself around people that are bringing good vibes, good energy, and just creating a community of folks where we can all grow together. At least that's the goal.
So how does your cultural background then influence your perspective behind the camera? It's not something that at first I really thought about like bringing my culture with me. I've just gotten, as of recent time and within the past couple of years, just got to a point where I'm able to cherish my culture a lot more. I try to go back as often as I can, and every time I go back, I appreciate it so much more. And I think even my affinity for color, that all started in Antigua, because just the natural tropical environment, like in my early photography, is very vibrant, very colorful. And I think it's just like being in that environment kind of translates to where I am now. And I've also tried to keep that culture and that intention strong, because a lot of times if you're on Instagram or if you're watching a film and you are inspired, you kind of chase that reference mark without realizing you're kind of becoming someone else's style, and what they took years to kind of figure it out, you're essentially chasing that. And for me, now I'm at a point where I try to develop my own just likeness and understanding of what I like, what I don't like, and now being patient with myself with the process, and understand that it is a process and it will take some time. So in what ways then do you think mainstream media can be more authentically or more thoughtful, like in the representation of like people of color and like the basically like within like not just the black experience, but within like any ethnicity of any experience?
I think we should equality is something we should definitely strive towards. I think equality is allowing for just allowing to appreciate someone's culture and just their very being, even if you don't understand it. Like, give it some sense of appreciation, because at the end of the day, like, we're all human, we all bleed, you know what I mean? So it's just like just bringing that sort of level of appreciation, I guess is the word that I can think of at the moment, towards a community of people, I think is the best way, because a lot of mainstream media or outlets will say they like one thing or another, but when you really see it, it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, I wish that we lived in a world where mainstream prioritized more like great films of like Sembeti or just even like Julie Dash, just or Charles Burnett. Just like I wish there was more. Whenever, here in America, when we think black culture and media and art, I think it might just be the way I think right now, but it's because like a lot of within our industry we do a lot of music videos. I feel like there's just like a very specific stereotype outlook on that, and I think it's like even that, and with like Latin culture too, there's a very small lining of how people perceive like the world through different ethnicities, through their work. And if people like got more chances to see a movie that's made by Julie Dash or by Burnett, there'd be a lot more of an appreciation, I think, because in a sense they're kind of telling the same stories as like a lot of the filmmakers they probably looked up to, the same for us, and we just want to elevate it in our own way. But within your film, the Sundance Rejects, I definitely like what you were saying. I was thinking more about that film because in a sense it is about a guy who basically, there's this guy that makes a movie that is commenting on the black experience, and he's a white filmmaker, and he gets accepted to Sundance. But the story is centered on the main character, who is a black man who doesn't get accepted, and they're in a classroom of rejects. And then the guy that gets accepted finds out he gets accepted, and there's a lot of emotional turmoil within the story because the black filmmaker feels like he's never gonna get his break, and the white man that made this movie about some guy that stole money from his aunt was very stereotyped in black culture in New York, and there's a lot that's being said there without it really being said. Like, they have a moment where they do talk about like, yo, you're a fraud, and like, oh, you're jealous. But I felt like it was very true to that state of mind, because I do think like, I went to film school. I've seen things like that in a way. Like, I still think we kind of do every now and then. We worked on a movie this year. I'm not going to say who, but there was the guy decided to write a black character in there, and she started talking like baby like just very, do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what the fuck you're talking about. Obviously, and we all fucking know.
Yeah, but there's I think there's too much of that shit going on. But yeah, it's not. It's. I don't know if it's a thing that ever like we can correct it. We can put light on it. We could say like, yo, these are the things that we need to be more aware of.
Well, the question is it wrong?
Depending on who's making it, I guess. How do you feel about that then? Since you shot that movie, like, what are your thoughts behind that in particular?
I think that it's a very multi-layered question, just because of my experience of I've seen a lot of experiences and examples where black folks, people of color, are just being used as a stepping stool for someone's portfolio to look eclectic. And I'm not sure, but it doesn't seem that these folks are breaking bread with these communities or sitting down and really getting to understand these communities, rather than just using them as an image, or like, this is my work or that. So it's just like, for me, it's like, to your previous questions, we gotta really respect people for real, you know what I mean? And not just think of them as a caricature, or and a lot of our influences as to why we think one way or another about a specific group of people is already co-opted, you know what I mean? The blaxploitation era, and even like Japan, like some of my favorite anime, they have a specific depiction of black people because that's what the Western media showed to the world of, that's what black people are: thieves, robbers, and it just goes on. And it's just like, again, we have to really respect people for real, and have a certain sense of equality, because now you have a specific image of black folks and people of color that the world thinks that's real. So when you have Native Americans, you think of them in a certain way because of cowboy movies. You know what I mean? Blaxploitation, you think of them in a certain way. Or even one of the first films to be screened at the White House, Birth of a Nation, you know what I mean? You think of black people in a certain way because there was a standard set in place that goes way beyond just that film. But like, images are powerful because it helps to somewhat plant a seed in someone's mind of what this may or may not be. And you can really reshape a narrative of a group of people and create a sense of xenophobia without, well, I'm not saying without meaning to do so, because a lot of times it's meant to do so. So for me, that's why we have to respect and honor people as human beings and their cultures, and try to get to understand it without really casting judgment. I think I'm fortunate enough to have worked with some really great directors who are really intentional about the work that they're doing, and the cultural resonance that it has and links that it has to one group or another. And that's another reasons why I love doing the thing that I do, because within the process, it allows me to learn so much more. Like even doing Victorine with Lanish Sharon, I didn't even know that zombies, the name zombie was a West African or African term, until like diving into voodoo and realize that Haitians has a specific way of reanimating the life of someone who has passed. So now you think of America, big billion-dollar industry of zombies and various different apocalyptic is taking someone's culture and co-opting it for capital. You know what I mean? So it's like,
and they're all the same. They all make them the same now.
Yeah,
So
I mean, even deeper than that, the hero's journey is not necessarily something that existed for film. It existed way beyond that. If you do your research, you'll find, again, it's something that's been around for a long time, and now you have this formulaic way of storytelling because you saw something that existed and you took it to, again, make so we just have to. I hope that at a point we can really appreciate people and their culture and have a sense of equality across the board. And one culture is not greater than the other, and we just can come together as a community and and I think this world can definitely benefit from that way of thinking.
What do you think of Tyler Perry?
Wow, what a transition!
No, the reason why I ask because I'm not even trying to be funny. It's that I watched some of his movies and
He perpetrates a lot of stereotypes and biases, I feel like, in his films.
yeah, I know. That's why
Yeah.
So I'm curious, but even though I'm aware of those things, there is a part of me. There's like this small degree of me that is like I turn everything off and I'm like I'm watching something that is just kind of entertaining for some. Like we saw a movie of his the other day, like as a I don't know why I don't know why we watched it.
Malik had recommended it, and then we were like,
What's the name of the movie?
Divorce in the Black or something, and I felt like there was a lot of stereotypes played into it. And it's very strange because I do think he's a very talented actor. But as a filmmaker, it seems very like one noted. So I'm always curious to know that for black filmmakers, like what's their take on him if they're familiar with his work.
I would personally say I'm not too familiar with his work, to be honest. When I was in Antigua, I knew of him for his stage shows, his plays.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
As he started to make films, I just within my cinematic knowledge and just practice hasn't had the time. Well, I haven't really gone down that rabbit hole just yet. I'd say towards the stereotypes and stuff like that, I would say using trauma as entertainment is a very thin line.
Yeah.
And I don't think it always works out for the best.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, it's like you're essentially like amplifying a certain perspective that may or may not be true, and you're amplifying the traumas that people go through on a day-to-day basis for capital.
Right.
So the balance that you have with if that's right or wrong is to be determined, but it's a very slippery slope to use trauma as entertainment without setting an intention of making it a point of something to overcome,
Right.
or just have a greater understanding of what the situation is or isn't. But yeah, they're black folks who make stereotypical blaxploitation films as well. So
It's always a rare few, right? Because it's all about it all boils down to truth. Like a great film.
All stereotypes come from.
Yeah, but there's always like a specific film or filmmaker that comes from it's very challenging. Like I feel like Steve McQueen with his you seen the Axe trilogy, the Small Axe trilogy,
I have not. Oh, Small Axe, yes.
Small
yes,
Axe,
yes,
yeah.
yes.
They're very unique in the sense that they do capture like that. There's some films in that trilogy that touch upon very traumatic events, and then there's another one that is not necessarily putting light into the trauma itself, but the way the people in a party internally kind of grapple with it, while also celebrating life, which is something that I feel like in a lot of movies when depicting black trauma don't really like to navigate because they want to stick to the trauma, and it's like let's focus on black trauma. But in his film, is very poignant on just also letting us like see just like how people within a culture just kind of intake things, and it always just comes down to like is it true or not, and how it like represents, how it conveys itself.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it's like it's how it's representative of the truth or a community. I think Steve McQueen and Xavier did an amazing job with the Small Axe series, and I think it's clear when you watch the series, you can feel the intentionality of what they were trying to highlight and feature the stories, lineage, and communities of people who often don't get highlighted in the mainstream way. And I think we do need more films like that, like even what you were referring to earlier about your culture, and not seeing a lot of that within the mainstream or just in general. I think in independent cinema or just cinema in general, we need to do a better job of highlighting more stories of just even what we would call a regular story. I think it still has some beauty in it. It still has some nuance. It still has a lot to learn.
Mm-hmm.
I think even the term culture in itself, you know what I mean? It's like there's a lot to learn from there, because what we deem to be culture might just be something that's imposed from one group to the next.
Right.
So we just need to really, I think, I try to do my best when it comes to in film. I think to one of your previous questions of doing my research and just kind of do a deep dive into just the research into the story or the script, and try to find various different layers in which that can inform that intention at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's all you wanted to
Go ahead. You go first.
I wanted to, even though I love what we're talking about, I do want to transition to another topic, if we're down with that.
Sure.
Well, wait, what
are you?
Film versus digital, and the aspect of
that's
using
funny.
film.
I was going to ask that too.
Before that,
yeah.
I do
Yeah.
want to open up a question to everybody, just because I feel like with film, there's like, the educational aspect of it, but I feel like, because I've been talking, so for context, my brother is an architect, right? Basically him and his partner, they study upstate, but we were talking because their college is a pipeline for architects and engineers to go straight to like Lockheed Martin, military contract jobs, basically feeding into the military industrial complex. But we were talking about having ethics be taught in schools like this, where you're kind of a cog in this system that perpetuates either violence or, just kind of doesn't really help the agenda of what's going on in the world. And I feel like...
By design.
Yeah, by design. And I think that when it comes to media, because I do agree images are important, there also is a lack of like ethic conversation, moral conversation in terms of the business side, but also representation and what that means to people, to just do the research. Because I do agree with that. There are a lot of things, and especially now with the internet, people feel like they can just recreate, make whatever. They have a template in front of them and they just copy it. So I just want to open this up. Like, do you guys feel like ethics and morals should be taught in film schools when it comes to media and or like communications? Because I think that might be something important.
I mean, yes, but I'm also I'm a pessimist when it comes to this concept, because I think everything is just a cycle. At some point, it's just another elevation of something that we experience from the fucking 50 years ago to now, and we're still having the same conversations about how do we. I mean, when you choose between morale and capital, I mean, we live in a world that is very clearly showing us that capital is more important than lives, than children's lives, than the workplace, the way people get hired and the way infrastructures move. But I do think that we're much more mindful and aware and more intelligent now. Our generation, at least, as we're very aware that there are certain actions that we need to take and practices that we need to really put out on display. But it's hard because, it's a very dominant, like we can make those practices, right? And we can like be the standard for our industry. But there's so many higher ups and different, there's different groupings, different studios, different whatever, that they all practice within a means that is so against morale. So it is very tough. But yeah,
it's a very, in my opinion, ethics is very subjective. It can be very subjective. What is right? What is wrong? Right? We talk about Tyler Perry. Is it wrong? Can a person of the culture make fun of their own culture? I guess that's the question.
Yeah,
or that's ethics. What is right? What is wrong? And
We could be critical.
we could be critical,
yeah.
but what's the intention?
Yeah.
Is the intention to make fun of it just to make some bread?
Yeah.
Is the intention to make
Well,
fun of
that's
it?
the question to ask, right?
To say wake up like Spike Lee's been doing for the past how many years? You know, what I mean, it's like I think is why. The why, you know, if it's just for capital, then you just that's exploitative, you know what I mean? And is we've seen so many other examples even within this industry of someone coming in and just seeing what they think is a great story and just exploiting that. And I think when to the conversation of ethics, we just respecting and really taking the time to really plan this out from top to bottom, because, you know, doing my research and even some of the older films like Daughters of the Dust, like it took Julie Dash like 10 years of research to do that film and some. So it's like, we're now in an era where it's like fast food filmmaking, fast food content, where we don't really want to spend that much time. And now it's easier to get the information because the internet and just various different means. But I don't think people want to really take the time again to break bread with communities and sit down with people and really get to know people and then create films based on that. Sometimes it's just a check. It's just is a target to hit, you know, as so it's we just got to be respectful of the process from pre-production to principle of photography to post-production, the full 9 yard, and yeah, what's the intention behind it at the end of the day?
Yeah. Like, I definitely feel like when it comes to morality and ethics, it is very tricky. I think even in philosophy, there's a whole branch on like, is there a metaphysical list of like morals that all humans follow? Because in every culture, it seems like everyone has the belief that like killing is wrong. That might seem like a universal morality and ethic, but then there are certain cultures that believe killing might be justified in certain circumstances. What I do think we should teach is media literacy, which I feel like has been lost even deeper with the internet. Because I feel like even before with TV, people were still a bit more critical because they had more time to be by themselves and think. But I feel like now with the internet, and especially like our generation who grew up with it from the very like beginning of it. Like I still remember like YouTube in its early days, social media, and how like it, in a sense, it did open us up and it gave us a platform to create our voices and create new refreshing content. But I think as this time has emerged, we are very formulaic and everything we see is the same images and people just follow what other people do. Like we hear something and people take it as 100%. We no longer ask like why or is this right? Like, do I believe this because I truly like sat down and criticized it and thought about it and to see if it's real from the evidence I have had, or am I just believing this because I heard a person and I'm too lazy to like do my own research? And I think that comes down to like anything from the news to like music to like even movies. And I feel like ethics and morality might be very wrong, but I think I want to touch upon the point where you brought up earlier about community. I think like if we were to teach people more about community and kids from a very early age, I think in a sense it would help us to understand each other more in our differences and ask why does this person believe this compared to me, you know?
Yeah, man, the iPad kids are not really going to understand community, I can tell you that much.
This is why for our industry it's so important to know what film movements are, because every filmmaker now, all they know is about fucking Puma, fucking commercial shoots,
Snipes.
like snipes, like just really cool looking images shot on Alexa. Like we don't know jack shit
12
about.
millimeter fisheye right to the eyes.
Yeah,
Like,
all eye candy stuff. We don't really pay attention. And then it is like this is the same, the same community of filmmakers that are like dying. They're starving for like like an actual something of actual meaning.
But there's
And-
also intention right here. There's back to intention. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to plug in here. Sometimes eye candy. I know, yeah, whatever. Sometimes eye candy. If you're solely just doing like cool little shots for some stupid shit, like yo, if you're just trying to fucking make a cool sneaker commercial that has no intention other than to make the sneaker look cool, yo, all for it. Let's fucking go.
But the problem is that there's too much of it to a point now where we've accepted. Where I mean, this goes back to algorithms and all that bullshit about, because in a way we're almost kind of like enslaved to our phones at this point as a way to get work or a way to showcase what we do. That it does become a point where it's like there's so much of that you've already lost a little bit of sense of like, what is it that why did you become a filmmaker in the first place? There's not a lot of conversations about German expressionism or French New Wave or the Mexican golden age of films, or like, there's the conflict that's going on in Palestine and Lebanon. Like, there's so many films that we can probably explore that the West doesn't put any effort into really restoring. And that's
respecting.
that's another conversation. Or African cinema, or there's just you could it's crazy how many different stories you could probably take away from different movements. And it's very fascinating that we're only really stuck on the European movements, because it's the movements that were taught to us in the beginning, that the American revolutionist directors decide, like, I want to do this. But like, there's like, to what you were saying about media literacy, and it's like, I do think film education, like just learning about the thematics is so much more important sometimes to me than learning about how to use a camera, because you can do that now. I think anyone could just shoot and you can make something look great with any kind of camera. Like that's a skill that isn't necessarily really that demanding anymore, but to like really kind of have something to say, because that's what at some point everyone wants to say something. At some point, I don't think people just want to make cool shit. At some point,
that's what cinema is. You're just expressing what you want, the message that you're trying to convey.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
But to the point of media literacy and also being respectful is like, just also understand, like, a wide lens against a black face has been used to distort. You know what I mean? And now we do it in commercials, and we do. So it's just like the media literacy of understanding, like, when you put that wide lens up against a person who might have a bigger nose or bigger lips, it gives a different distorted way of looking at a human being that was used for a long time. So it's just like, we also want to be mindful of repatriating just certain aspects of image making that shouldn't be the case. And yeah, we definitely should have a certain sense of media literacy, as Stalin said. Like, I feel like people are chasing the formula of how things should be or shouldn't be, rather than taking the time to like test and really find what's unique to you and your voice as a image maker, filmmaker. Because the commercial ways, at the end of the day, is about selling the product. Where there's communities that were the product, you know what I mean? So it's just like, we have to be respectful and also do our due diligence to really research and have a better appreciation of what to do and what you shouldn't do, because there's just certain stereotypes, tropes, and various different things were set in place and are still the standard to this day, that we should just find a better way of highlighting and painting people in the best way possible.
That's why formulas are so. That's why they're so easy. It's easy to do formulas. That's why like most Pixar movies now suck, because they try to follow a formula, and then you start to watch them. And I'm sorry, I'm going on a random tangent about Pixar, because I just saw a Pixar movie that they decided that they wanted to incorporate characters of color, but it felt very like, we're just going to throw this in there because we know we live in a time now where everyone's like, we need all inclusivity, but the main character is still white and everything is through the point of view of a white character. So it felt very misguided, like a lot of the representation of what it was trying to show. but it was a formula. And it's like, essentially at the end of the day, it's like, yo, we kind of what we're asking for, or what we're demanding ourselves is to go back again to intention, but to also like really like, yo, like if you're gonna like tell a story, really work hard into having like have the experience, or talk about the experience, have conversations, have dialogue, like take years. That's why Barry Jenkins took what, like a decade to do Moonlight. That's why it took Coppola to spend fucking 5 years doing Apocalypse Now.
I knew
like
that was coming.
it's yo, but what about Come and See, right? A film that raw. It's not something that you just pull out of your ass. Like you just,
My question is, what are you doing in those 10 years to make income? Like,
I don't
see,
know.
that's my
Sean,
question.
But look at Sean Baker. I mean, he was shooting fucking everything with his film camera and his 416 camera, and in between those times, he was just saving up for each little project.
Yeah.
Every director has. Like, what did the Safdies do? I don't even know what the
Safdies
Safdies
come from Mad Money.
Okay, never mind then. So, but
They went to private
what it-
school,
but like-
60 grand per
Like,
kid.
but
Like Terrence Malick teaching poetry.
year.
Yeah, Terrence Malick taught poetry for like 2 decades before he made his his fourth film, you know, like, or Scorsese like went around and started shooting like different parts of Little Italy and places.
Scorsese
that,
became a multimillionaire like in his
yeah, but yo, we're not gonna
early
discredit,
30s,
but we're not
yeah.
gonna discredit his like how he got himself there, because he didn't come from money. He was in a position. Yes, he's white, but he was in a position in his life where he only knew Little Italy, which in his Italian American state is considered hood at that time, and he went and just started documenting things. This is what Spike Lee did, you know, and it is all about just trying to again convey the truth, and the truth is really hard. It's almost like journalism. If you want to make good journalism, if you want people to really make a distinct difference with the way the turn of the tides are. It is so much more than just formula based, which is why 90% of the movies suck. Like, because they're just very formula based.
My question is, 90% of the movies that suck, how are they getting funded?
Because it's easy. Because
But who is signing
Because
these
the studios,
checks?
like, look at.
I'm like
Because the studios,
appalled.
because I'm gonna be honest, a lot of times studios also do shitty movies because they want a tax break. They know they're gonna flop at the box office, and they can write that off. That's why, like Warner Brothers, when they were gonna release like Batgirl and all those other movies, they decided not to release it to take. They lost so much money that year. They decided to, like, instead of losing more money in like the box office and pay for like marketing and stuff, they were just, let's shelve it and then do a tax write off. And be like, we lost.
Get me in the room, yo. Get me in the room.
but
Get us
also-
in the room, all of us in the room with
but
Warner
we're
Brothers.
it's
Let's
also
do it.
it's also about the trend too, you know. It's
Yeah.
like the last 10 years have been a very specific kind of movie being made, the metaverse, the universe, whatever the hell.
I think people gotta take more risks. Yo, I
Well,
think
when
we
you make
gotta
movies
try-
like Joker
That's true.
2, and you got guys like you that are like, yo, sign me the fuck up. Like,
sign me the fuck up, but
Yeah,
but
but
that
you-
is different. The reason why Joker 2 was made was because the first one was a major fucking success.
Which by the way was
quadrupled their fucking earnings,
which by the
and
way
they
was
said,
made
"Fuck
by
it, let's do
a
another
guy
one."
who saw 2 great films in the
Yo, let's
past
not-
and ripped them off.
Let's
So
not.
he
Yo,
took- exactly.
Marty
exactly.
was an EP on Joker
Doesn't-
1.
Yeah, that's anyone could be a fucking EP. Just put your
He
name on it.
gave a fucking,
Spielberg does that shit for a living as well. He puts his name on
Yo,
an EP
he's
for
not.
everything.
Spielberg
You
is
really
not going to
think-
be an
you-
EP
you
on
really
a
think-
project
you really
without
think-
at least knowing a little
so
bit
you
of
really
the
think he
project.
saw Revenge of
I
the
didn't
Fallen?
think Joker was that bad. But
You
Joker
really,
what? Yeah,
no,
see, thank
you really
Thank
think you really think Steven
Fucking
Spielberg?
great.
You really think Spielberg looked at Revenge of the Fallen and was like, yes, like everything that you're gonna do here.
I
agree
haven't
with.
seen Revenge
Okay,
of the
all
Fall,
right, no,
so I'm not going to comment on that.
it's
But
a-
I'm going to let you know right now
it's a
that
name.
Spielberg will not put his name on something without at least believing and agreeing and seeing the fucking vision.
Scorsese believed in Shark Tale, right? Shark Tale, yeah, like yeah. It's
Oh, Shark Tale is a good movie, homie.
like yo, at the end of the day, at the end of the day, it's it is about like
Shark
this
Tale is
is
a good movie. Too.
you know, this is what people respond to. People thought it was cool, but if people were like more intelligent and like actually watched movies, they would know that Joker was a ripoff.
Listen, it made sense from an investment perspective too.
Also, it
you
gives
got
a terrible,
Joaquin.
it also gives a
calling
terrible
people out.
message. I think that's a movie that gives the message that people that commit shootings and atrocities actually like we should feel bad for them because they're outsiders. I think that's like a terrible message.
I actually do have a comment on all this, and I think it also comes down into besides like media literacy. I think I feel like a lot of people don't do, and I am like culpable of this because Yanni just called me out on it. It's just like looking inside of us internally, and being aware of our own biases and stereotypes. And I feel like a lot of people, and I think it's just a human flaw where we never want to admit that we might be corrupted in a certain sense. Because in order to accept that is to accept that we're not perfect. And humans always want to
100%.
strive for perfection. And I feel like
I'm fucked up.
You know?
I'll be the first one to say that.
That might be an American thing.
I think so too, but
Yeah.
but I think it might also be like I think Americans definitely do it the most, but I
Yeah.
also see it in like Latin America. Like
Oh,
I
yeah,
mean,
for
like
sure.
I find it crazy that like I always thought racism was a thing that was very prevalent in just the U.S. But then I would visit Ecuador,
Yeah, it's-
and I'm like, we're all Ecuadorians, but there's so much segregation within our own community. I'm like, I understand. I always thought like racism was like because we are different, because you are from a different country, because I am from a different country, we don't really mesh together. But I'm just like, I'm in Ecuador, we're all Ecuadorian, but I'm still seeing like a lot of just racism and biases here because of the color of their skin, just one little factor, and
But
yeah,
Go
but
ahead,
like
sorry.
people aren't aware of that. And like, I'll hear people like in Ecuador like make comments and like bad jokes about like people with darker skin, and they see it as a joke and then nothing's wrong with it, and it's just that. But I'm like, you clearly don't understand that you're being racist and biased and you're perpetrating these things, but with these jokes, and you're not aware of that, And I think a lot of like media and things that we see comes from that. Like people don't see it as wrong because they're not internally looking inside and be like, this is a stereotype that I believe because I've been fed this. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, but I believe it and I've never criticized it. So like change that about myself.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, is who is setting the standard? Who is like planting that seed that's going to germinate to be like a racist trope within a community? You know what I mean? So it's like we ought to be. I mean, I don't want to say we ought to be like has to be this way, but yeah, it's like I think. As image makers, as storytellers, we can play a part in healing various different injustices in communities. Because like even one of my favorite quotes from Gordon Parks is very much that. Like he saw the camera as a weapon against injustice. You know what I mean? And for me, when I first came across that quote, it was so profound because just knowing how I grew up and, for straight up watching scheduled programming as a kid, because I grew up from a poor family, didn't have cable until I was college. So I just grew up watching Beverly Hillbillies and all this like scheduled programming. And it it creates a world view of the world that may not necessarily be true. You know what I mean? You grow up and you crave for the American dream and you think you need a golden retriever and all this extra shit. But it's like all of that is setting place for you to want to pursue a certain like agenda. So I think as image makers and filmmakers, to be able to make stories that are highlighting the truth is very important, because it allows, within those Ecuadorian communities to, for the people who are darker skinned to feel like they have a voice, to also see themselves on TV and to feel just a sense of like representation, and also just to show the equality of like we are all human beings. We are all of one community or another, and it's not a hierarchical structure of you're this way or that way. It's like let's treat each other with kindness, hopefully,
What draws you to analog in today's digital dominated world?
Excuse me. I just like the tangible quality that comes from analog. I think the photochemical aspects of it gives it a certain like soul, or gives it a certain quality or patina to it that I just gravitate to. Sorry. In this era is like you can use an emulation and kind of make a digital sensor look like film. But I think just even the practice, for me, it's more so about the practice of shooting film. Like everyone comes to it with a certain intention, knowing that we have to respect the full process, sound to rolling image. And with digital, you're more prone to dump truck or shotgun directing, where you spray and pray and figure it out in the edit. And with film, like, once you hear that shutter rolling, there's money going down the line. So at least, or you have a finite amount of film in the can. So you might as well very much respect the process and be true to the script and the intention as to what you're trying to convey.
When working with film, then what are some of the challenges you've encountered, and how do those obstacles shape the choices that you make for each project?
I'd say some of the challenges that I've encountered with shooting a film would be to just be patient with the process. So my film photography, for example, I kind of got into film photography because I always knew that I wanted to shoot on motion picture film. So I just figured that it would just be smart to learn film photography and just use that as a way to practice towards when I'm finally able to shoot on 16 or to shoot on 35. So I kind of treat it as like a tool that I use to sharpen my skills and build that level of training or putting in your 100,000 hours. And yeah, but one of the things that I've learned more so from a technical sense, I guess, would be I love shooting on the Bolex. And with the Bolex, for anyone who's used one before, your viewfinder is pretty small. So it's like even knowing your focus, like you should take the time to measure your focus and check your exposure and making sure that everything is correct before hitting the shutter, because it always sucks to think you got some fire and then that shit comes
out black
or
white
or not in focus and you're tight. So it's just like that the art of making mistakes is something that has taught me a lot. I've always heard if you want to get better you got to shoot more, and I always thought it was BS, but really, like, if you want to get better and know more about the things that you like or don't like, you kind of have to go out into the world and do it. And I think shooting on film kind of gets me closer to that, because it slows me down, one, and it allows me to respect every aspect of it. So the focus puller's job and understanding that, you should respect that and the depth and various different things. And it just allows me to just understand the process a lot more.
Do you how often do you like shooting on digital? What gear do you own, like between digital and film?
So for film, I own like 2 Bolexes, Super 8, and a bunch of still cameras from medium format to 35. My first digital camera that I've ever bought was a Sony A7S 1. And then the second digital camera that I bought was a Ursa Mini 4.6K Pro.
Oh. Yeah, that was mine.
Question. Your Bolex, are they on the turret system or PO?
So I have one Bolex that's on the turret system, and that was gifted to me by my mentor, Daniel Patterson.
It's a nice gift. That's a hell of a shout out, Daniel Patterson.
He has helped me out in so many different ways, just with the knowledge and resources that he's gifted to me. But yeah, I was doing She's Gotta Have It as a camera PA. And at the time, I realized that I really liked films that were shot on film. And then I was going around asking, like, the camera team, like, if they knew anything about a Bolex. And people are like, yeah. you should get this one and you shouldn't get that one. And one time I just asked Daniel about it. He was like, yeah, man, I have a Bolex. I've had that since college. I don't even use it. He was like, you know what? If you shoot anything, if you shoot something on it and it turns out good, you could just keep it. And I was like, word, what? But that's how he is. He's very much of a believer of like paying it forward. And also when he gifted it to me, he told me that the same thing that I'm doing for you here, I want you to do for someone else. So after you've finished using it and you feel like you've gotten what you needed out of it, I want you to give that to someone else, which is my intention to do. So when I got that Bolex, at some point I realized like having one that had a PL mount would be great. So I did some research and I found out about the bayonet version. And then I saw a good deal on eBay, and I just went ahead and took a chance and got that one. Boom. And that's how I got two of them.
Have you seen like a big difference when you put PL glass on it?
Big difference. Well, it's taught me so much because I realized when you use the C-mount glass, it's easier for me to get my focus on the C-mount glass because I think it's closer to, I don't know how the technicality it works exactly, but I can find my focus a lot easier on the C-mount glass. On the PL glass, for the most part, a lot of the times I use super speeds, which are known to bloom when you shoot it wide open. And also super speeds, just the depth and range when you're at shallow f-stops, it's kind of hard to gauge focus just based from my tests. I think Ultra 16s do a way better job at just providing a better fidelity in the image. But for now, I own a 9.5 super speed for my Bolex.
That's fire.
And I'm hoping to expand the set to a full range of super speeds.
Definitely do. Get the 16 millimeter set for super speeds. We'll invest in the 16 mil cam and let's consign that shit. Let's get the 16 mil. Let's do it.
I'm down.
And we'll get Ari Ultras.
White man doing business
on the podcast.
I think that's a great fucking deal. Super speeds are the greatest lenses ever made, in my opinion. They're our hottest lenses without a doubt, and they have I think some of the greatest images historically and to this day.
Super
That's
speeds.
crazy. That's crazy because
they're affordable.
You literally said the opposite like 2 days ago.
What the fuck did I say?
GK,
Signature Prime. No.
I do have a question for you when it comes to like the technical aspect of filmmaking, because like there are certain standards and I guess like rules for reposition, especially like cinematography. Like when it comes to like digital, every digital camera has its native ISO, which you're supposed to shoot on. You know, like what's like the mini like native ISO? 800, right? But then I was like listening to like an interview with Roger Deakins, and he was like he loves shooting on digital and on NLF. But what really shocked me, he's like I always try to shoot at an ISO of 3200, which is totally against like what. Yeah, he literally said he's like
gives it like digital grain.
Yeah, so, he's like I love like having that extra silver grain. Yeah, and I'm just like, this is totally what I've been like taught, you know.
He just likes it well. That's really it.
You know? Yeah. So my question for you is like, is there like certain rules that are set in place that you don't really believe in, and have you developed like your own rules for filmmaking, either shooting digital or film, that like might not be taught in school when you're starting out?
So to your question about the rules that are kind of set in place that I may go against or may follow through with. My homie ATA, Anderson Andrews, told me a long time ago that the ISOs are made into the camera for a reason, like they're there to be used. And it never really clicked on me when he said that years and years ago until recently, which to your point about Roger shooting on 3200 ISO, the next film that I'm doing, that's my goal, is to hopefully shoot the whole film on 3200, because it does give it a digital grain, and it also softens the image a little bit more and kind of shaves that kind of digital look of it. So for me, it's like understanding the rules, of course, the exposure triangle and all of that, the kind of rudimentary rules. But I think, breaking them, I feel like you learn so much more. And just the act of like exploring. So it's like that's one of the things I love doing is like on each film, kind of test something or tried to use each film to explore like this new thing where it's like on Victorine, I use a mix of spherical and anamorphic glass for the first time, because within our dream sequences, I wanted to find a way in which like I could shoot our dream sequence in a creative way that felt different from reality to the dream sequence. And I felt like the distortion and fall off of anamorphic glass felt perfect for the dream sequence. So like even when we intercut them together, depending on the f-stop, like you might not see much of a difference, but you can feel a difference. So for me, it's like, in the next film, I would love to shoot it on 3200 and explore that, which, films like Waves and Bruiser, Atlanta, they have done the same thing, if I'm not mistaken. So, again, doing your research and just kind of going for it is my approach.
Hell yeah. We are approaching closer to our end time, but I have one last question on my end. Mm-hmm. And it's I ask every guest this. Mm-hmm. Do you consider yourself more of a painter or more of a plumber when it comes to cinematography? Yeah, I love this fucking question.
That's a great question. Well, I'd say this. I think there's an art to plumbing. I think, as with all things, you can find an artistic way of doing anything. But I kind of see myself more of a painter. And to go back to like my earlier point within our conversation, my introduction to art was, me wanting to be like my older brother and seeing him paint and wanting to, draw, paint as well as he did. So I tried and tried. I wasn't the best, but eventually I got really good at it. So for me, I kind of see myself as a painter. I think that's another reason why I love shooting on film, because it almost feels like it feels closer to painting than digital photography or motion picture. So yeah, I would say a painter.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah. Well, the images that you make, I mean, definitely is very, paintful. Anybody have, I guess, any last questions?
I guess I want to go to like a technical question. But have you attempted any technical tricks or experiments in your cinematography that pushed like your creative limits?
You got any secret sauce?
Secret sauce?
I got that from John Charles. He did like a filter trick. It was like, he's like, yo, this is the secret sauce. Don't tell nobody.
Well, I'd say photography, one of the things that I've learned that I really like is at the time I really enjoyed Portrait 800, and I would shoot Portrait 800 at 160 and pull it 2 stops, and then in post I'd bring the exposure way down and I'd crush it and add a lot of contrast, and I felt that was the closest thing that I saw to my eye. And that's one of the things that I've done and still do to this day. Take an 800 speed film stock, shoot it at 160 and pull 2 stops, and for whatever reason I just love it. And that's it's not necessarily a secret sauce for me, but it's just something that I love doing. And then that just allows me to shoot anywhere within that range, because then I can shoot it at 400 and I actually still get proper exposure. As far as cinematography goes, you know what, man, I'm at a point in my path right now where I'm just like trying to be more patient with the process and just trying to strip everything layer by layer. So I have this thing what I do like almost every day now, where I pull a photo into Lightroom Mobile, and I just take the curves tool and I just color or just practice color grading or finding exposures within the Lightroom. And I think has been really helpful for me to even walk in a room or within, post-production coloring with a colorist, just kind of knowing what I want. To answer your question about a secret sauce, I think I'm still in the process of figuring that out.
You're putting the ingredients together for the secret sauce. And you can have multiple secret sauces.
Exactly.
You don't need one.
Still in the process of chefing it up.
What are your thoughts on rep?
Oh, shit. Yeah, that should be the last question.
On what?
Representation.
Oh,
and because that you make a good reminder.
Don't tell me what the last question should be. Yeah. Well, no, what's your but what are your thoughts on representation? Because you have representation, right?
Yes, I do. I'm currently signed to PM Artists at the moment. To the question of representation, I think representation, at least for me, representation is very important. I think I struggle with organization, and I'm dyslexic, and I have some traits of ADHD. So for me, it's good when I'm able to just focus on the process of making the art, and not stress about a lot of the other managerial things that kind of gets in the way a lot of times. I think representation has allowed it to flow a lot easier for me, and I'm hoping in the future that I'm able to, in my process of becoming a feature film DP, to be able to focus on a project by project basis, without feeling like I'm being pulled in too many places. And I think representation allows for that support, and my agents have done a really good job in supporting me in that way, as far as just making sure things are good and checking in.
You feel like DPs out there, or like artists that do I guess for DPs, you think representation is necessary in order to excel in your career?
I don't think it's necessary to a point to excel per se. I think it, like I think you said earlier, is like kind of in this industry, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Mm-hmm. I think that can work for some folks. But for others, I think you get to a point where if you don't have a certain level of representation, if you're not as well known, you might not be able to progress as fast, or you might not be able to get certain jobs because there's really no one out there advocating for you. So I think representation is helpful in that aspect, to be able to have someone to put you within conversations that you wouldn't normally be in. And I just would tell anyone just to find a place that feels like home,
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah.
What's next for you?
Currently, prepping for a short film in Virginia with Ellis Finney, who did Sundance Rejects, on the film that you saw. And I'm also prepping for another film in Oakland with a good friend of mine, Takai. And right now I'm just at a point where I'm trying to be a little bit just more patient with myself in the process, and also trying to get to a point where I'm able to focus on more feature film length projects, and at some point hopefully maybe get into the camera union as well, to be to get a certain level of protection when it comes to wages and various different things.
Nice.
Hell
yeah. It's all a journey, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's all a journey.
One step at a time.
Where could people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at Kevin_DP, or you can find my work on my website at KevinGKFrederick.com. And yeah.
Thank you.
Fuck yeah.
Thank you, Kevin.
Hell
Thank you.
This is great.
Alrighty.
Yeah,
Yo,
thank you.
till next time, all right?
Appreciate you.
Love it.
Thank you.
So-
And